Hi, I'm Tyler Driscoll. I'm 30 years old. I'm an ex-prisoner and then ex-convict. I was 16, 17 when I was incarcerated in September 2006. I was released in 2018, September. So that's approximately 11, 12 years. So I've seen my fair share, witnessed a lot, probably more than I should, and I wish I never had. But it has toughened me up to take on the world and be successful. So I was remanded in September 2006 for attempted robbery and possession of a bladed article in public place. They sent me to be remanded all the way in HMP Castington, which is in Cumbria, up near Scotland, hundreds of miles away. From there, I was sent to HMP Doncaster before it was split into two establishments, and before they rebuilt most of it. So I was there when it was all Victorian, which is an absolutely shithole at the time. Dirty, grimy, found it difficult to get clean clothes, etc. Not the best. Officers did not give a shit. If you thought the officers would had any fights or anything and officers would witness that, they would give you a beating for that. Throw you around a bit. Not good. So from there I was sent to HMP Lancaster Farms, which again was at that time was a relatively new building, and it again at that time was young offenders and juveniles. A lot of fighting, etc. Not the best. I didn't spend long there because of my bad behaviour. It did make me worse. On all my files, it's got me as being worse during my incarceration, specifically as a young offender and juvenile. So in 2015, I was transferred from Lancaster Farms on the border of Wales to Rampton Hospital. I was eventually kicked out of there, or as they say, treatment was not sustainable and they could do nothing to help me. So they removed me from there. Now, I went to HMP Nottingham, straight from there. So from Nottingham to their local, not my catchment area, which would have been any of the prisons in South Yorkshire, Doncaster, Donny, Armley, anything really. They tried to be difficult, send me to their closest one, again a couple decent miles away, again cutting off family connections. So I was at HMP Nottingham, got along at first, it weren't too bad, but since 2016 noticed massively changes, more violence. Well, at first it was more drugs. Then I'd noticed that things had changed when I first went into prison. It was heroin, cocaine, smack, those sort of drugs when I went to HMP Nottingham in 2015 to 2018. It's mostly legal highs, mamba, black mamba, spice, that's very common. I did witness a phase of heroin going around HMP Nottingham, on one or two occasions cocaine, but it's mostly the legal highs. This fueled violence, bullying, worsened the hierarchy. When the prison system banned smoking and tobacco become a trade commodity within prison, that made things worse, people getting robbed more. But at HMP Nottingham, I witnessed people get murdered, take their own lives. I was there for most of the deaths. I mean, the first one I remember was a guy called Solomon. I can't remember his first name. He's a black guy, big guy, lovely guy. He really was. Now, he overdosed or died of legal highs. But I remember the day before, he'd been happy, you know. He even said to the survey lads he'll do him some drawings because he was excellent at drawing, you know, skill there. He could have put that to good use if he pulled through. But I did know Solomon, and sadly one of the things he was saying to close friends was prison is not what it used to be anymore. Prison has got worse. And his words were exactly, and I quote, "I cannot stand it anymore. Prison is not what it used to be," end quote. And next thing he followed through on what he said one night, and he died, basically. He had member. He brought enough, or borrowed enough, so he didn't have to pay it there and then. And he weren't bothered about debts or anything because he knew that day or that night would be his last. He took his life because he could not stand prison. It'd become such an intolerable, disgusting, repulsive place. Officers never looked after you. Prisoners never looked after prisoners like they used to do back in the day. So everyone out for themselves. He could not stand that. No support, no one for him to reach out to. I was also a listener with the Samaritans, and one of my call-outs was actually with Solomon before he died, a couple of days before, but I can't really discuss that. And I heard some of his concerns which were not good. Just to mention a few of the other deaths was Anthony Solomon. Yeah, I mentioned him. What is it? Andrew Brown, Shane Stroughton. He was a good lad. I was friends with him. Mark Maltby, come across him a few times. Really. There was one sad suicide of a guy called Darren. I can't remember his second name, but I think it's set. I don't know how to say this. Is it cerebral palsy syndrome, where basically he could not walk properly. And when he'd smoke legal high, Mamba, Spice mainly, he'd walk fine. People thought this was funny, so they would feed him legal highs. They thought it was funny. You'd have prison officers and prisoners mocking him, walking basically like a spastic behind him. He was a nice lad. I personally used to chuckle to myself because he'd always, if he felt you was disrespecting him, he'd always want to fight you. And I'm not going to lie, it was quite amusing because the grown big men, some at the time were on steroids, didn't know what to do. They were just like so surprised. And he was a decent lad. But it's sad because it was thought that suicide was an accident, as he would always threaten to hang himself if he did not get a spliff or spice or a roll up. But on that day it was thought that no one had come round or responded to his calls, so subsequently he was found dead, hanged. And his case is also sad because he had kids taken away. He was an alcoholic, and during my time at Nottingham I had various jobs, trusted jobs, untrusted jobs, and one of those was working in reception. And during my time there, the person who had committed suicide, Darren, he'd gone in and out a few times, and I'd generally try and support prisoners, especially as a listener. And I said to him, "Are you not taking anything with you? Letters from family? Photos?" And he said to me, again it's a quote, "No, I don't need any of that." For which I replied, "Why? Surely, they're precious." And his exact words of reply was, "I don't fucking need them. I'm coming back in tomorrow." And no surprise, he was. And this is a life for some people that feel they've got nothing in their life but to be in prison, because they're getting better in life, 2-3 meals a day. But then the unreported side of HMP Nottingham, or some parts that I think is unreported, is how there's one death in the segregation unit. Can't remember the guy. I wouldn't want to comment on the situation, but he apparently slipped, or is reported officially as he slipped and caught his head on the bottom of his bed. Now, all the prisoners there at the time knew the prison officers had gone in and given him a beating, and he smashed his head. The officers carried on giving him a beating and left him there. But obviously, they're not going to report themselves for this. And nothing came of that. They just took the officer's word as being truth, gospel. Another occasion, someone had, I think again this is one that was unreported, a suicide. And then it became obvious to all the officers and prisoners at the time that, he was found hanging. But then when that body was taken to the coroner's, and the coroner examined the body, the naked body of this prisoner, he had multiple bruises. Now, how is a hanging man, even unconscious, because when you hang yourself you go unconscious, able to inflict bruises upon themselves? So this begs to ask the question, if officers were telling the truth, he hanged himself, how did those bruises get there? The officers said no prisoners went in there, so therefore the only other people that went in was the officers. So is it the officers that caused it, or is everything they're saying not true? So I also witnessed another problem there myself. That's with what's called is an act. I can't remember what it stands for, but an act is if you're on what you may have heard of as a suicide watch. So you have someone either sat outside your cell, or you have more regular checks, and then you report, do a write-up in a red book about what the prisoner's doing at the time, whether they're watching TV, whatever, if they've hurt themselves, whatever happened, you've got to report it in the book. There's one occasion on D-Wing, this was where it was induction room. They had about 15, 16 act books out, all open, and I was in the office. One officer was in there, another officer walked in, seen them, and even in front of me, he said to the senior officer, "Oh shit." By this time he walked over to the acts and looked at them, and he said, "Oh shit, no one's checked or filled in these act books for 8 hours." Bearing in mind they're supposed to be checked every about half hour. And that officer that said that said to the senior officer, "Do you want me to just fill them in to cover it and make it look like we've done our checks?" And the SO said, "No, that is too long a period to cover up in written paperwork that we've not done our checks." Make of that what you want, but it does not go good, considering when I was there, it was during the time, and this happened, where there was multiple deaths in a space of 2-3 months. There was also 2 murders that I know of. One of them, I think it was a 23-year-old, wanted mental health support, he could not get it, so he killed a 70-80-year-old. That was quite sad. This older prisoner, his family never knew he was in prison. Due to get released, and he was known to keep himself to himself, never come out of his prison cell, and he would sit in his prison cell, watching his TV on his plastic chair with his back towards the prison door, cell door. Now, this 23-year-old lad who could not get mental health support walked into his cell one day, strangled him. He died. No help, no support. He died. Cold-blooded murder. And afterwards, this guy calmly walked to the office. I'm sure this was Effring. I may not be right, but my mind tells me it's Effring. But anyway, he walked to the office, told officers calmly, sat down, and because he was so calm, the officers thought he was lying. 5-10 minutes passed, and this guy's dead in his cell. They then had a laugh and joke about it, the officers with him. But when they realised he was being honest, they ran to a cell. But then, what is worrying that they were not listening properly was the prisoner told them exactly what cell, but the prison officers went to a different cell. Seeing that someone is in the wrong cell, gone back to the office and take the piss out of a guy, saying that he's fine and he's alive. And the prisoner actually showed the officers the actual cell where it had killed someone. And there was a dead body on the floor. This is reality, even when the officers don't take it seriously. Another concern is obviously the last murder I knew, quite concerned really, because this was on D wing, when it stopped being a induction wing. It happened on the floor underneath me, 2 cells to the right. So if I'm looking out the door, it'd be to the right. Underneath, a guy come out of his cell one day, I think it was an evening, on association or domestics, went to the office and said, Padmate's trying to kill me because I won't mop the cell. I think one of them was foreign. I don't know if it's the guy that died or the one that did the killing. Cold-blooded murder. But one of them was foreign. And the officer said, we ain't got time. We've got no spaces. Go back to your cell. That night he was locked in his cell with his padmate who tried to kill him. The next day, staff come on, did their checks. And they checked on this specific cell. Yeah, one of the inmates were there, but the other inmate was on the floor or on his bed, and he'd been killed. So this inmate that had been killed was sent back to that cell by officers who did not have time, etc. Could do nothing. And when he went to officers, he said his padmate tried to cut his throat. When they found him the next day, he had his throat cut. He had a bag over his head, suffocated. So this is literally cold-blooded murder. His padmate was intent on killing over not having his cell mopped. The system does not care about that. Now, other unreported things that I've witnessed that shows the mentality of some officers is, during my time as a reception orderly, there was one guy who did not want to get transferred, so he hanged himself in one of the holding rooms. Now, anyone that sees a prison or has been in a prison will know they have enclosed TV cabinets, like a blue case, clear. They have them for tools and whatever, and normally at the side of them they have 2 big round holes for wires or bars to go in, obviously for whatever. And this guy hanged himself. It was only about a couple of centimetres off the floor, his feet, but you'd think staff would still get him down. But instead, nurses and prison officers stood there laughing at him. Laughing at a prisoner hanging himself. Is this justice? You can make your own minds up. If you're in prison and you're watching this on any contraband phone, you may be laughing, but this could be you. This could be your friend. in this situation at some point. Also, Nottingham, whilst I was there was an officer suspended for quite a long time. He got his job there. No. Again, got away with it. For forcing a prisoner onto a transportation wagon in a cell, in box, a sweat box as it's called. And he had a blade in his mouth. He told them that. They did not care. They manhandled him. I think he swallowed the blade. I don't know if he swallowed it whilst twisted up or controlled and restrained, or when he was on the bus, but he's forced in. By the time he arrived at the other prison, he was dead. Because he had swallowed the blade, it cut all his insides, and is basically ignored. In a box, being transported. Like cattle. Worse than cattle. And this is a state of the justice system. Really? Only you can make your mind up. And this is what Great Britain and England calls justice. You can make your mind up. But another worrying thing with mental health is people not getting it. People waiting months and months. At Nottingham, I knew people that come into prison again after being out for a while. They'd get, because there was a shortage of drugs being issued or unable to see the professionals for months on end, people would get prescription drugs for their mental health before they'd come back to prison, because a lot of people wanted to be in prison, and they'd bring the drugs in with them, which you can do, but then most of the time these drugs would disappear. Where do these go for? From a secure establishment where only prison officers and prison nurses or doctors have access to. These are prescription drugs that are illegal to have if they're not in your name. Yet they just disappear into thin air. Nothing done about it, nothing reported, just a blind eye turned, or as I say, swept under the rug. When people are put on drugs, they're normally sedative. So if it's a bit like saying, if they truly work, that's good. But if they truly work, then why using the same drug on every type of person? Because if you take sedative or an animal tranquilizer and sedate someone, so they're sleeping constantly, drooling, overly fat, then does that mean that you've cured them? No, it does not. All that means is you're drugging them up, making them like a zombie, and hiding their difficulties. But that's not help. That's not justice. That's abuse. And one example is of the drug they used, even at Rampton Hospital, to sedate people, is clozapine. And to demonstrate this point, it's like with mental health, there's three main categories of mental health: learning difficulties, mental illness, which is things like schizophrenia, and then you have like personality disorder, things like antisocial, etc. And when I was at Rampton, and even in Nottingham, people were being prescribed this clozapine for personality disorder. You wouldn't think much of it, but if you research that drug, it's designed for people with schizophrenia, paranoia, hallucinations, auditory and visual. So why on earth are professionals that have got GCSEs, been to school, got degrees, been to uni, get paid hundreds of thousands as psychiatrists, using drugs designed not for specific mental illnesses? My personal opinion, and I might be wrong, is that they're just using drugs, or wonder drugs as they call them, to sedate people, make them like zombies. They don't know what they're doing, slow you down. One person I knew there, lad, I felt sorry for him. As a result of his medication sedative, got really fat. and he began to grow breasts. I mean, it's like he had the breasts of a young lady, and he actually could produce milk. And this is justice. This is looking after mental health, and doctors do not care. You can make your own choice. So before I finish up, also, I want to raise a concern which worsens the risks of suicides. Is at the start of this video I mentioned going to prisons near Edinburgh, near Wales and the Midlands. So a lot of prisoners are getting shipped all over the British Isle, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, sometimes thousands of miles away. They lose contact with family, friends, so they become isolated. And the main word there is isolation. Isolation is known to be one contributing factor towards suicide. It has, in my opinion, been some parts of reasons has gone towards people's deaths, but really, it's not good. I think also, the prisons are just not fit for purpose. They're not. Their estates teams do not look after the place. A lot of them, like HMP Nottingham, is infested with rats, etc. It's not good. When I worked in their laundry also, it was like there was a shortage of prison clothes. So I think the prison rules and regulations say something like 7 pairs of boxers each, 7 pairs of socks each, and I think it's 3 or 7, 5 something t-shirts, trousers and jumpers. HMP Nottingham holds 1,060 prisoners. Yet at times when I worked there, they've only had enough clothes for 150 prisoners. How does that work? And if you look over their official records, they will not report having a problem clothing individuals. Of course, when you went there, people were clothed, but they was clothed in dirty clothes, smelly clothes, oversized, ripped. Where's the humanity in that? You tell me. Other things I witnessed and heard of with rapes. People, if they were thought to have had contraband on them, would have, like on F-Wing, there was loads of people who went into a cell because there's rumours he had a contraband phone. He said he hadn't got anything. He was forced to pull down his trousers and underwear and sit on the toilet in front of random lads. A whole group of them. And because he generally had no contraband, he could not produce anything. So he was punched and slapped around a bit while sat on the toilet. He was then subject to one person coming in with a rubber glove, no lubrication, and shoving his hands up his backside to check. And that was when they found he had nothing. The same people had done the same to someone else. Again, they found nothing, but they used a spoon. On the first occasion, which was the last time that happened, one of the lads, I can't remember his name, but he's going around boasting. He thought he was big and clever, but a lot of prisoners was telling him he's just like a sex offender and he's to get on the VP's vulnerable prisoner wing. And as soon as the prison said that that's sexual assault and is getting done for sexual offence, he started denying it, which says a lot. But just think, this could be your family member. This could be your kids. Also, whilst at Nottingham, I was on C-Wing a lot. And another sad thing was there was once this gay guy. I do not judge people for their sexuality. I think everyone, regardless of sexuality, religion, should be treated equally. But I took him under my wing a bit because he was gay. And every time he walked out his cell, he would get bullied. He'd get beaten up in the showers. People would attempt to molest him, so he didn't want to shower. He refused to come out of his cell regular, even to get his food. People would spit and put greenies in his food. Another occasion that I heard of that really pissed me off was walking down on the ones, because Nottingham Prison mostly has 4 floors on each wing, and someone from above wing poured boiling hot water over him. Now, I totally accept people's religions, sexuality. It may be different to myself or others, but if it does not affect you, religion, sexuality, etc., let people be. At the end of the day, we go to prison as a punishment, not to get punished, bullied, raped, murdered, to commit suicide. We go there to serve our time and come out. Nothing more and nothing less. I think it's also concerning how, whilst at Nottingham, there are some officers that I got along with, some of which were suspended for their conduct. I think 1 or 2 kept their jobs and a few resigned, and the others were sacked because the police checked one of their phones to find on their social media there was ranking the control and restraint of Muslim prisoners specifically, out of a ranking them out of 10, and bragging to each other about what's good and what's not, what's funny about it. And it's just appalling, really. I think I did myself write to the prison probation ombudsman, which they said they find very worrying, the reality of the situation there. But to put into context of how bad the system was, especially in Nottingham Prison, the period that I'm talking about between 2015 and 2018 is the period where it had 4 or 5 deaths in like 2-3 months, the highest for most prisons. And that's just of what's been reported, not been swept under the carpet. Then it was deemed unsafe, unfit for purpose, I think. It was also, because recently they brought out urgent notification system for seriously failing